All right, thanks. I want to thank everyone for coming out for this final panel discussion of the fall semester. I think we've got not only a good topic, but some excellent panelists to visit with us about this topic. We're going to be talking today about acquiring a good education in the 21st century. And the topic of education is one that dominates public policy discussions at the local, state, and national levels. Everyone seems to agree that obtaining a good education is a key to achieving the American dream. However, as with most public policy issues, definitions are important. And the different definitions given to various topics can lead to fundamental differences in how we achieve or try to achieve those policy goals. For our panelists today, I have two basic questions. First, what is a good education? Second, how is this education obtained in the 21st century? These are important questions not only for students and faculty members to ask, but for parents, school administrators, public policy experts, and elected officials as well. If we cannot identify what a good education is, how can we possibly hope to achieve it? It is equally important, maybe even more so, that we determine whether or not a commonly accepted definition of a good education can be created. I'm excited to hear the answers to these questions from each of our panelists, as well as their other insights they will share with us. Each brings a wealth of experience on this topic and can provide some unique insights as to how we should both define a good education and how one can obtain it in the 21st century. So let me introduce our panelists to you. Misty Englebrecht is a professor of education programs at Rose State College. She teaches educational planning and college orientation. In addition, Professor Englebrecht oversees the pre-education associate degree program. Professor Englebrecht has been at Rose State College since 2005 with previous roles as a student, an academic advisor, a secretary. She holds an Associate of Science degree in business from Rose State College, a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from the University of Central Oklahoma, and a Master of Business Administration from Oklahoma City University. Also a Master of Education from the University of Oklahoma. Beginning college as a first-generation, non-traditional community college student, Professor Englebrecht developed a strong sense of devotion to community colleges. She is currently pursuing a PhD at OU in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies with a research emphasis on community colleges. Please join me in welcoming Professor Englebrecht. Next, we have Professor Julie Lesko-Bishop. Julie Lesko-Bishop is a professor of education at Rose State College. She earned her bachelor's degree in mass communications and a master's degree in education at Oklahoma City University. She has 23 years of experience in common education and another 14 years of experience in higher education. Professor Lesko-Bishop's experiences range from journalism to publishing and to education. In addition to her work as a faculty member here at Rose State College, Professor Lesko-Bishop also serves as a freelance writer for local newspapers and as a feature writer for Ion, Oklahoma. Professor Lesko-Bishop always knew she wanted to spend her career working with students and helping them to learn. Her own educational philosophy has been influenced by both Dr. Joseph Renzulli and Dr. Jim Webb. In addition, Dr. E. Paul Torrance's studies in creativity have formed the backbone of her own educational approach. Her role at Rose State College has allowed her to combine her two passions, both journalism and education. Please welcome Dr. Julie Lesko-Bishop. Next we have Professor Kristin Hommel-Miller. Kristin Hommel-Miller is a professor of family services and child development at Rose State College. I got that all out correctly. I didn't stumble over that. I'm very pleased with myself, thank you. Where she has been a faculty member since 2011. She attended Utah State University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in early childhood education and master's degree in family, consumer, and human development, with a specialization in infancy and early childhood. During her studies, she developed a passion for the areas of developmentally appropriate practice, effects of trauma on the developing brain, and intentional teaching practices with young children. Professor Hommel-Miller has her K-3 teaching license and has taught in both private and public school settings. She has also taught for a variety of early childhood programs. Professor Hommel-Miller has been both an assistant director and director of 2 child development laboratories, both at a 2-year and 4-year institution of higher education. Additionally, she spent her time as a trainer and consultant for the Children's Center, which specializes in providing on-site assistance for child care centers, preschools, and other programs serving babies and children with mental health care needs. Please welcome Professor Kristin Hommel-Miller. And finally, we have Brandon Dutcher. Brandon Dutcher is a senior vice president at the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs, a public policy research organization based in Oklahoma City and now in its 22nd year. A Bartlesville neighbor, Mr. Dutcher received his bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Oklahoma. He received a master's degree in journalism and a master's degree in public policy from Regent University. Much of his work at the OCPA involves examining and promoting various educational policies in the state of Oklahoma. Mr. Dutcher is listed in the Heritage Foundation Guide to Public Policy Experts and is editor of the Oklahoma Policy Blueprint, which was praised by Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman as thorough, well-informed, and highly sophisticated. His award-winning articles have appeared in Investor's Business Daily, World Magazine, Forbes.com, Mises.org, The Oklahoman, The Tulsa World, and 200 newspapers throughout Oklahoma and the United States. He and his wife, Susie, live in Edmond and have 6 children, 1 in medical school and 1 in preschool, and the rest are in between. Wonderful. Please welcome Mr. Brandon Dutcher. All right, I am going to simply, we'll go down the line and let each of you take as much time as you consume, or until I hit the buzzer and say time's up, but that won't happen, I'm sure. So we'll start with Misty and then move down to Brandon. So again, you guys offer your thoughts, and then I'll come back up and we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, to address the first question, what is a good education? Coming at it from the perspective of community college, from higher education, I think that education provides the learner with a sense of purpose. It gives them the tools to live a principled and significant life and contribute to society, and keep our society moving forward, keep forward progress going. I think too, a good education it depends on who is explaining it. For some students, a good education is getting enough skills and training to be able to get a job. For others, it is obtaining knowledge in order to maintain a credential or to become a lifelong learner. And so I think that a good education is a very difficult concept to define, but that's sort of how I define a good education.
In my opinion, a good education in the 21st century is very broadly empowering our students to think, that they be able to problem solve, and that they're able to make good decisions in society today. In 1965, President Johnson signed into law the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which then in 2002 became the No Child Left Behind Act, which is what we're using currently to educate our students, to make them thinkers, to make them good members of society. In 2012, the Obama administration has decided that they want to update it based on some of the results from the past, which is probably a very good thing. We want to use some of the lessons that we've learned in the past to upgrade it. And in conjunction with that, we're currently using what they call the Common Core standards, which probably most of you in the audience were under when you were in school. The Common Core is to better prepare the nation's students for college or for the workforce. Currently, all but 4.5 states in the United States have adhered to that, and I say 4.5 because Minnesota has only agreed to adopt the English portion. Alaska, Nebraska, Texas, and Virginia are still our holdouts. The new standards establish benchmarks for reading and math, where prior educational goals varied from state to state. They're trying to streamline so that we are all teaching the same thing, but we still have the freedom to teach as we see fit. Along the lines of how is this education going to be obtained, I think that we're working toward that currently as we're upgrading and adapting. We're combining successful theories that already exist. We're going to tweak them for today's students. Hopefully, we will arm our students with universal hardcore tools like how to think, how to set goals, how to plan to accomplish those goals, and then to set them free, just like that butterfly, to achieve those goals while we continue to serve as guides and mentors.
All right, I think I'm going to come in from a different angle, so kind of bear with me. Again, I'm Family Services and Child Development, so I like to focus on a broader approach, if you will, but more so on the early childhood aspect, because that is my specialization. Piaget, Jean Piaget, is famous in my field, in the field of education, and he was asked in the 1960s, Piaget is a good theorist. If you want to look at good educational theory, look at Jean Piaget. He was asked the question, what is the goal of education? And he came up with a brilliant response, which I'm going to read to you. His response is, are we forming children who are only capable of learning what is already known? Or should we try to develop creative and innovative minds capable of discovery from preschool age throughout life? When I look at the idea of what is a good education, I want to go with Piaget's second portion of his statement. I would hope that in a good education, we are not just learning what is already known. And when we're doing that, we're just memorizing facts and data, and nothing new is ever going to come out of that. But if the goal of education, what good education would be defined as, would be innovative, creative, lifelong learning, that's something that I want to attain to. I know I can memorize facts, but being creative, being innovative, seeking after what is not known, I think is really should be one of the goals of education, especially a good education. Now, I'm proposing 3 components to what that could look like in the 21st century. The first one is to have high quality early childhood education. Again, that's going to be my point of reference, but when we look at high quality early childhood education, we're looking at birth through age 5. And with that, typically when a child is born, we welcome into the home. Typically parents have to go back to work, and so we send them off into the world, either through family child care, center care, so that could be daycare, child care, preschool, all those different settings. And what we're finding is that a lot of those programs out there are not very good. In the state of Oklahoma, to educate a 2- or 3-year-old, do you know what kind of degree you have to have? None. No, nothing, okay? You have to have a high school diploma, which is a lovely thing. But if you've ever taught a group of 2-year-olds, and I have, at one time, I had 24 2-year-olds that I was teaching in the classroom. And that was back in the days before ratios came into play. But I had 24 2-year-olds. Without my education, I would not have known what to do. It would have been disastrous. Okay? So what we're proposing, or what I'm proposing as high quality, is that the teacher in the classroom have at least a bachelor's degree, if not higher, that there be ratios. So 10 children to 1 teacher. That's lovely, okay? The other portion of that comes from the research from the Perry Preschool Project and the A.B. Sedarian Research Project. Both of those projects looked at what could happen if we offer high quality. They talked about the teacher education, they talked about the ratio, and then they talked about curriculum or teaching methods or teaching methods. And one of the biggest things that they found was Piaget's proposed 2 ideas within education: passive education and active education. Passive is just rote memorization. Active is actually taking in information, making it your own, and then creating something based on that new information that you have. And so both of these projects or these studies looked at active education. Specifically, the Perry Preschool Project began in 1962, and they collected data initially until 1967. They took data from 3- and 4-year-olds that came into a high quality program. They are now following all of those children from 1962 until they pass away. And so they'll follow in lifetime. So we're looking at lifetime effects of high quality early child education. And some things that they found
that were really interesting is that the children that had received high quality education, so ages 2 to ages 5, before they ever get into public school education, that they were less likely to be retained in the first grade, they were less likely to need special education, they were more likely to be literate by 6th grade, they were more likely to graduate high school. They also outperformed other children that were not in high quality programs. They were just maybe in that child care around the corner where the high school student is teaching, okay? They were better at intellectual tests, language tests, both in preschool and on the way up to 7. And then they also looked at school achievement tests at age 9, 10, and 14. All the children that were in high quality programs scored better than their peers. And that continued on. The last tests they were done were literacy and language tests, and those were done at age 27. They still outdid those same peers that did not receive the high quality program. Okay. So my first step would be high quality education for early childhood. And then the other 2 things I want to talk about is the need for creativity. Again, the idea of passive education where we're just doing rote memorization of skills, ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. If you're in a college math class right now, you're memorizing certain equations, right? That's good. We need those things. Those are concepts. But in order to really dive into something, we want to look at content. And so when we look at concepts and content, creativity gets lost with concepts. The example that I'm going to pull from is when I taught preschool in Utah. We had one of our preschool children go, at that time they had kindergarten entrance exams, a test, if you will, that a preschooler had to take before they were allowed into kindergarten. Thankfully we've done away with that, at least in Utah it was done away with. We had just vivacious 4.5-year-old that went in for his testing because he was going to turn 5 by the time the school year started. And one of the test questions was to write your name. So the teacher said, "What's your name?" Child responded, okay, we'll say his name was Joe, but it wasn't Joe, okay? And the child responded with Joe, and the teacher said, "Okay, I need you to write that now." And so then he took a piece of paper, took a pencil, and wrote AKA Batman. Now, we knew that Joe wanted to be called Batman, and so we did that. And so what he was telling this teacher is, yeah, I know my name is Joe, but please call me Batman. Now, interestingly enough, the principal for that school called our director and said, "Hey, your child doesn't know how to write his name." Our comment was, he does. He just doesn't want to write the name. He doesn't want to go by his given name. He wants to go by Batman. The sad part of that is that creativity that was in that child, he actually scored that incorrect on the test. And so it actually hurt him. Thankfully, he scored well in other areas, so he was allowed to go to the kindergarten. But I have a thought, if a child can say AKA Batman, they should be able to go into kindergarten, right? So the idea of creativity gets taken away with public school a lot of times, or the idea that we have to learn ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Dr. Stuart Brown, he is actually the founder of the National Institute of Play. If you have a chance, go to that website. It's lovely. He talks about the need for creativity that we all have that a lot of times gets taken from us. And he talks about the different ways people need to be creative, or in which we are creative in general. And he lists them out: joker, kinesthetic, explorer, competitor, director, collector, artist, creator, and storyteller. Now, if you go through one of those or all of those, you'll find yourself in that. Okay? For my husband, he's a joker. He's always been a joker. He was the one in elementary school that was always getting sent to the principal's office because he was always pulling a joke of some sort, right? He continues to be that way now. For me, I'll be honest with you, I'm the competitor. If there was a game that we could play that I could beat you at, I was going to do it, right? So you can find yourself in all of that. A lot of times, all of those things that we could be gets taken out, and we just go back to that rote memorization. So I would propose that a good education in the 21st century was actually take all of who we are and bring it into the classroom so we can be our creative selves, so we can actually engage in that active education that Piaget defined. The last component, and then I'll be done, I'm sorry, is using active education with a form of the project approach. Now, if you go to projectapproach.org, it's a wonderful teaching website. and it's built from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade. And what the project approach does is it takes, instead of just having what we learn about be letters and colors and numbers and shapes and theory, it says, yeah, we need to know all of that stuff, and I will teach you all of that stuff. But what is it that you're passionate about? What do you want to really be interested in? Okay? What do you want to study? We use a project approach. I was at Eastern Connecticut State University before I came here. We used a project approach in our pre-K program. We had 3 to 5 year olds exploring the human body. I had children where before we might just say, what is the name of this bone? And they would just recite it back, right? What we did instead is we got a skeleton, and the children took apart the skeleton. They learned the name of the bones, but they learned how to put the skeleton back together. Now, if you think about that, we look at all the different types of creativity that took to take it apart, and the knowledge that it took to put it back together in the right place. I had children learning about different portions of the brain. I had children understanding why we have calcium in our bones. So that it was this child-driven, hands-on, active education in the classroom. And children learned more than I ever thought they could when we engage all of who they are and bring it into the class, bring that into the classroom. So that's kind of my portion of it. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
Thank you. I have a 4-year-old who thinks he's Batman. Yeah. So I don't know. Former U.S. Senator Phil Graham from Texas tells a story at the time he was discussing education policy with a woman, and he said, my educational policies are based on the fact that I care more about my children than you do. The woman said, well, no, you don't. To which Senator Graham replied, okay, what are their names? I would suggest to you that's where we need to start when we ask what is a good education in the 21st century. I've heard some great things so far, and I wrote down 3 that I agree with. Sense of purpose, empowering them to think, developing creative and innovative minds. I wholeheartedly embrace all of those. But in the end, if you're a parent or if you will be a parent, you care more about your children than I do. So I'm not going to presume to tell you what constitutes a good education in the 21st century. At our organization, OCPA, we have numerous publications and public forums. We talk to lawmakers all the time, and we tell them consistently, in a free society, parents, not government officials, have the moral right to determine a child's path. Now, think about it for a minute. In America, the government defers to parents when it comes to raising their kids, right? I mean, there are countless decisions every day that parents have to make that they're just none of the government's business. Are you going to bottle feed or breastfeed? Parents. Are you going to let your boy start tackle football in elementary school, or wait, does he have to wait till junior high? Or maybe he can't play at all because of the risk of concussion. Are you going to make your kid get up Sunday morning and go to church, or are you going to let him sleep in? And if you're going to make him get up, where, Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, I mean, all sorts of decisions, countless decisions every day that parents have to make. And in a free country, the government defers to parents when it comes to raising their children. Now, since education is just a subcategory of parenting, I would suggest that the government should defer to parents when it comes to educating their children. Now, I'm talking a little more public policy, not as much pedagogical things as some of the more experts in that field are talking about. But from a policy standpoint, obviously the government is going to spend money on education. But the argument we make at OCPA is, instead of giving money to the system, give the money to the parents and let them decide what is a good education in the 21st century, and how to obtain it, where to obtain it. Now, not everyone agrees with me on this point of view. I remember very clearly sitting in the gallery of the Oklahoma House of Representatives in 2010, listening to a debate on a school choice measure. And one lawmaker, a good-hearted, well-intentioned gentleman, took to the floor and made the argument that He said in some cases, mothers and fathers know what's best for their child, but he said in other cases, quote, parents may think they know what's best, but do they? I would simply ask that lawmaker, if the parents in your legislative district are not capable of choosing a good school for their child, how can they be trusted to choose a capable official to represent them in the Oklahoma House of Representatives? Again, parents have the responsibility and thus the right to choose their child. Now, we know from survey research that Oklahomans have all sorts of different ideas about what constitutes a good education in the 21st century. Earlier this year, Sooner Poll asked likely Oklahoma voters, quote, if you could select any type of school, what type of school would you select in order to obtain the best education for your child? 43% said a private or parochial school, 40% said a traditional public school, 8% said charter school, 7% said homeschool. So, different parents have all sorts of different ideas, which makes sense. I mean, there are more than 700,000 students in Oklahoma schools. The vast majority go to traditional public schools, but some go to public charter schools, some go to private schools, some go to homeschools, some go to virtual schools, and so on. So how can I or anyone possibly claim to know what constitutes a good education for each of them? Some parents will say, look, I want my child to go to the local public school. We moved to there for that reason. The school is good. I've researched it. I like the teachers. His friends are there. He's in the band, etc. Great decision. Other parents will say, well, my child doesn't do so great in a large environment. He gets picked on. He doesn't make friends as well. He would do so much better in a little charter school or a little private school. Other parents may say, look, my daughter loves her virtual school. She does all her classes by noon, and then she's able to spend 5 hours a day practicing the violin, which is what she really loves and wants to do with her life. Other parents may say, look, I want my kids to go to a little Christian school. I want to reinforce the values we teach her at home. I mean, the things she learns in Sunday school, I want her to learn to be reinforced in Monday through Friday school. So, any number of different decisions, and parents will have different ideas about it. 700,000 different ideas, perhaps. So, what are our political leaders down the road at the state capitol supposed to do? Obviously, as I said, they're going to spend money on education. They need to obviously maintain at least a minimal regulatory framework to try to ensure that we have an educated public. But beyond that, rather than giving the money to the system, as I said, give the money to parents, either in the form of a voucher or a tax break or an education savings account, and then let parents decide. Former U.S. Secretary of Education Rod Page put it this way: let's design our school operations around the principle of universal school choice. Let's completely remove the power of government to dictate where a child attends school, end quote. So in other words, let parents decide for themselves what constitutes a good education in the 21st century.
All right, thank you all for some very interesting. Before I open it up for some questions from the audience, I might have a couple for our panelists to kick us off. I think maybe one would be, we kind of all represent different aspects of education, all right? We have everything from the college environment, child development, early education, common education, and in some ways, what we deal with is different, but in some ways they are very connected. A child that does not have a good early education is going to have trouble moving through elementary and middle school and high school, and a child that struggles there is going to have trouble gravitating into a college environment. And so maybe that's what I start with is, what are some of the challenges you have seen students face in any of those environments that we need to find some way of addressing? Whether, again, not necessarily saying who should address it, but identifying what needs to be addressed and perhaps how it could be addressed.
I'd like to tie into what Kristin mentioned earlier in that active education, because I'm a big believer in that, which of course is Joseph Renduli and his project, his type 1 project, type 2 project. And in college, I think we're a little reluctant to step out and do that. But as evidence today in class, I had my students do their own review, and they could do it any way they wanted to. I had some PowerPoints presented that absolutely knocked me back in my chair. As a matter of fact, I had several of them share the links that they came up with and the way that they did their presentations. I think when we turned them loose, they learned a lot more than what I even recognized. And I wouldn't have done that had we not gone into that active learning stage. So I think it's imperative in all levels, just like you're saying, they're all related. I think it's important that we all step over those boundaries and encourage that.
Are there challenges to in encouraging creativity in a classroom environment? Are there particular obstacles that have to be overcome?
I think the need for assessment data is things that we encounter, at least within the early childhood world, and even from the college aspect. When we look at how do we assess someone's learning and are they truly learning, traditionally that's done through testing. If you're anything like me, I'm a horrible test taker. I panic, my palms get sweaty, I start looking and, oh, that person's done before me and I'm going too slow, and oh, that person's only on page 1, I'm going too fast. And so we look at truly assessing, maybe looking at assessing in different ways and not just testing, but I'm a big believer in the portfolio system where we take samples of people's work, and even in the college classes that I teach, I don't just use tests or quizzes. I look at writing, I look at things like PowerPoint, using Prezi, so that hopefully along the way, if you're a great test taker, you can excel in this portion of the class. If you're an amazing writer, you can excel here. If you do fantastic with oral presentations, then that's how you excel here. So I think looking at not just one method or standardization of assessment, but more so looking at the broader component of maybe looking at portfolios and having to manage those, or having even college students to manage those.
I think that a challenge that I see working with the students here at Rose is that students have been trained to think on those terms, and so asking them to do something creative or asking them to do something besides a test and to apply what you're learning is sort of, it freaks them out, because they're just like, is this going to be on the test? How do I memorize it? Fill in the bubble. And so I do all projects. I don't do any quizzes in my classes, and so I'm having students apply these skills into their lives to make it relevant to them. And I think that my challenge is getting people to step out of that zone of being like, this is how it is, and being open to education, a different sort of education. I think the cool thing about college is that it prepares people to fail. I mean, not prepares them to fail, but it allows people to take risks and fail in low stakes environments. So, okay, you failed a test. Okay, the world is not over, but it gives them the ability, the resilience to maybe come back and keep going for more. And so I think that learning how to fail and get back up is also a key element of a good education, because it builds self-confidence and it builds resiliency, and all of those skills are necessary in the workplace. College also, teaches students work ethic and how to manage their time and how to manage their attention and how to communicate and how to work with people from all different worlds. And I think that is also one of the key components of a good education.
And I think the times we live in now allow for a lot more opportunities. When I was a kid, but I mean, you just went to the school closest to your house. That was it. And most people still do, but there are so many more options today. There are public charter schools. There's online. I've never heard of online school. I mean, you can drive, you hear the radio, go to the Oklahoma Virtual Charter Academy. So you can do that. You can. There's homeschooling. You can go to public school half a day, then take concurrent enrollment in the afternoon. You can do homeschooling with your mom and then go do Khan Academy. I mean, they're just, Harvard and Stanford have MOOCs online for free with all their content. I mean, the opportunities are endless. And that's a good thing, because one size does not fit all. And I think with technology, we'll just continue to see more of this.
I want to follow up on something you mentioned in your opening comments, Brandon, about the ability of parents to identify a good school or not. And I think while in general I tend to be sympathetic to the perspective that parents are probably in the best position to make that decision. I certainly know, for my family, we homeschool our children, and so I understand that. I'm wondering if there isn't, though, in some places with education, kind of like with healthcare, there's much about this, if you want to consider it a product, and I know those of us in academia don't like considering education a product, but work with me here for just a second on this kind of notion. If there's a lot about education that parents don't know, and I'm not talking about being able to teach their child chemistry or being able to teach their child physics or something like that, but how do I determine that this school is the right school for my child versus that school? Or how do I determine if my child should be in a smaller environment or one that has many options that they will kind of grow into and really be able to take full advantage of? And so I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on that. It's just, how do parents make those kind of decisions given that they don't have, as we all do, complete information?
Oh, that's a great question. And you look at the way we navigate the rest of life. How do we pick a good cell phone or a cell phone provider? We're not experts on the intricacies of every little thing, but we know enough from talking to friends, from reading reviews and so forth. You sort of find your way. And it's a consumer reports kind of world that we're living in education as well. I know Oklahoma's A through F report cards have been maligned and perhaps they're not perfect, but fortunately there are other report cards, if you will, out there. Consumer reports type things like gradeschools.org, globalreportcard.org. Parents and others have created these services where you can look at the various attributes of a school, read online reviews like restaurant reviews, and parents eventually can know, okay, this will work best for this child, but ironically for my next child it actually won't work best. You need something totally different. In a free society is often messy and there are tough decisions to make. So in the end, you can always just, people do the research now. Where are you going to live? I'm going to live in Coffee Creek because it's close to Edmond North and that's where I want to go, or whatever it may be. Parents make school decisions now. It's just real estate based. So I think parents can shop and navigate the way they do the rest of life.
I think what Brandon is saying is critical thinking is essential in all aspects of life.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in that.
Start teaching them early, right?
Exactly.
All right, do we have any questions from the panel? Okay, one way back.
My question kind of is, I have 3 children that are elementary age, 7, 5, and 3, where I go from a range from my oldest being in a gifted program to my youngest being autistic. The school systems don't know what to do with all of them as a collective. They're products of parochial school, and from our home state, moving here, this is their first year in public school, and the public schools have failed them drastically. And I'm thinking about next year taking them out and putting them into doing homeschool, which the program that we chose gives an $800 grant to do outside activities so they can stay socialized. What do you do with parents that are afraid to challenge the school system? Because going through this whole process, I felt very ran over. The principal telling me, no, your kids shouldn't go here because they're not going to get a good education, or you're making the wrong decision for your children. But I'm coming home and I'm seeing the decisions that I'm making. Sending them to a public school isn't the right decision for them. So how do you have parents challenge when they feel like they have no say in what their children's education is? That's
sort of the false animal to dominate. But see, it's not fair to the public schools, for starters. They can't be all things to all people. So in a way, it's not fair to ask. I'm not criticizing you at all. I empathize with your plight, but it illustrates public schools. They're supposed to teach gifted and talented and autistic and everything in between. It's a really tough thing to do, which is why my point about educational choice, I think, is so important. You know, how do parents fight back? In the status quo, they can't fight back because they don't have any leverage. They don't have purchasing power. They don't have any place to go. But if you have school choice policies, which, by the way, you may know Oklahoma has it, the Lindsay Nicole Henry Scholarship, so your autistic child could get that to go to a private school.
We've been fighting that because we've been denied an IEP because we came from out of state in order to apply for the scholarship. So it's been a constant fight.
Yeah, I think even without an IEP, you can go straight from 3-year-old.
We weren't in Sooner Start.
Okay, you weren't in Sooner Start. Okay, well, there are also tax credit scholarships. I'll point you to the Opportunity Scholarship Fund, which is osfkids.org, which I'm on the board, and we help start this, that gives scholarships to kids, so you might check that out. But to answer your question about parents, they have to have power. We had, 12 years ago or so, John Walton, Sam Walton's son of Walmart, came and gave a speech for us, and he's an educational choice philanthropist. He died in a plane crash, tragically, but he said something I'll never forget. He said, in our family business, the toughest stores to run are the ones with the least issue, which makes sense. I mean, the Walmart on 2nd Street is going to be better because there's a Target across the street. I mean, they're going to make each other better, and parents have money. They don't have to go to one place or the other. So that's how you empower parents, is you give them the money and the power to choose.
And I think it does speak to some of the comments that we heard as far as, and we've mentioned this in class before, kind of sometimes we defer to experts who really don't have knowledge about your specific situation. They have knowledge of a broader view of things. And so I think when you're a parent in that situation, you have to really rely upon, what am I seeing? What are the results of what I'm seeing? And what do I do with these results? And it's not easy. Again, as I mentioned, having homeschooled, now 5 children that we have, it's not easy. You work really hard at doing that. But for those who need or want that environment, it can really pay off for both the parent and the child. But it's not an easy one. It's certainly not something I would tell people, oh yeah, just go out and do it and don't think hard about it. That would be as calamitous as being in any other kind of environment that isn't working. But I do think you do have, and in Oklahoma, we probably have some of the least restrictive educational laws as far as you being able to choose how you would like to have your children educated as any state, which I think is good in the sense that it gives us a great deal of freedom. We can experiment with different environments. We can create different ways and look at how these ways impact children and what produces good results. So I think you're fortunate in that situation. I do think the problem you're running into is unfortunately not an uncommon problem. Anybody else have a, yes?
So my question is more or less on just standard testing in general. Do any of you believe that by lessening the number of tests each child has each year, like the 5th grade reading test and other yearly, annually tests that we have to take, would limiting those help students not just be, oh, I know this is this, and help them be more creative? Because I know when I studied for them, I just read the study guide and memorized it. I probably don't even know half the information now, that's not to say, but so would limiting those tests help kids be more creative?
I think those standardized tests, I thought look at it. Those standardized tests are squelching creativity. And you will find, I think, in most elementary classrooms in particular, that they are teaching to the test because many of them feel they have jobs that are contingent upon those results, which places a great deal of pressure on everybody. And I think the children are the ones that are paying the price because they're not getting to do the fun things that we got to do. You know, we used to cut out construction paper and color things and demonstrate through creativity that we did understand the concepts. I didn't know that at the age of 11. I know that now. But I think that we're killing that with those standardized tests, and I think it makes it very difficult for those students. And my concern is, how creative are they going to be when they grow up and become adults? Because we've killed it, I think. I don't know. Those results aren't in.
In some ways they are. I think when we look at that, I'll tell you play on my cards, I guess. I'm a big believer in portfolio development, all the way from 3-year-olds on up. I have a portfolio that's my professional portfolio. And so I think when we decrease the amount of standardized testing, we do increase the ability to be creative. Now, I will tell you, I taught kindergarten underneath the standardization protocol. As a teacher, you can be creative within the standardizations. You still have to make sure you're teaching all the concepts, but how you go about teaching those concepts is up to you, really. And so if, as a teacher, you choose to be creative and you choose to allow your children in your class to be creative, you can do that. I'll tell you, it's not a 40-hour-a-week job if you choose that route. Whenever I was really involved heavily in teaching, I would spend, 60 to 70 hours a week making my lessons personalized for the children and creative so that I could meet those standardization quota, but I did it in a way that engaged my children. One of the funnest things I got to do with kindergartners is we built robots out of aluminum cans. Now, if you go into any kindergarten classroom, we typically don't see those kind of things unless you have a teacher that knows the standards and knows what the children's interests and takes that and puts it in so the children engaged. The short answer is, yeah, I think creativity can be increased, but I don't think it's necessarily stifled by standardization. It's the teachers that I think feel the pressure, and so that pressure can stifle the teacher's ability.
A couple of weeks ago, we took a fact-finding trip to Indianapolis. We took 10 state lawmakers and Superintendent Hoffmeister and some of their staff. And one of the schools we visited was an inner city, it's a voucher school, private school. The student body was purposefully half minority, low income, half wealthy. And the school was done intentionally to have that sort of diversity, which is a great model. Someone, I think the superintendent asked the principal, do you take standardized tests? He said, yes, we got 99th percentile or something. She said, well, how did you teach the test? How much did you prepare? He said, oh, no, we just said we didn't prepare at all. We just said, oh, okay, we're carving out 3 hours, 4 hours and doing it. And they aced it. They didn't. Why? Because they learned the stuff during the year. They learned the academic content. They didn't have to study for the test. They just were smart and well-educated and aced it. I think that's a much healthier model than some of the stress-inducing things you referenced.
I think there's a balance in our need for assessment, right? We need to be able to demonstrate. If you're going to, if we're going to tell parents, you have the right, you have the responsibility to select your child's education according to their needs, they need some way of being able to measure the performance of these different options. I think, the convenience of standardized testing is it's easy. We just give them a test and we do it. I think on our end, from what most of us see, it's not, it should never be considered a comprehensive measure of student learning. It might be considered an aspect, one aspect of measuring, one aspect of that portfolio that you mentioned, but not the only aspect or even the most important aspect. I think there are other ways, as we've discussed, that you can measure performance that are equally important. I think it's a tool that maybe has become overly relied upon. A tool that in limited instances has some usefulness, but beyond those limited instances, kind of distorts how we provide education, how we determine whether students are doing well or not doing well. And so I think that's kind of what we run into from my perspective. Anybody else have a question you'd like to ask? Let me throw this one out. Obviously, we're in a higher education environment, and my question would be, what is it from your perspective, when you have students coming in, first year, first semester students, what are some of the challenges you see them facing, and what kind of recommendations would you make both to them as students or to other faculty members or administration on how we can help them overcome those challenges? And I'll just throw that open to anyone who wants to jump in there and answer first.
Well, Common Core is supposed to be preparing these students for college and for the workforce, and Misty and I teach educational planning, and so therefore we are dealing with a lot of students that are maybe not so prepared for college. And I think we're finding, what did we have, 700 plus students fall semester, which is a pretty significant number of students that are requiring help. And I don't know what to attribute it to, but I know from our end, in working with the exit outcomes, we spend a lot of time teaching them goal setting, teaching them time management, teaching them things that they really should have learned before they got to college. But perhaps because of standardized testing, no one had time to teach that. I don't know. So we're struggling with it as well.
I think for me, my demographic of student is a little bit different. Most of my students are typically older than me. They're coming back after spending years in the field, actually educating young children. They're already in childcare centers, daycare centers, preschools, and they're coming back for their education. And so the challenges that I see for my students is this idea that I can't do college. It's above me. It's too hard. They're terrified. Sometimes literally just getting them to walk through my classroom door is one of the biggest challenges I have. I have one student, and thankfully I knew she was coming. We are fortunate we have great academic advisors in social science, and so I knew the student was coming. I knew when she enrolled, the academic advisor came to me and she said, the student is so nervous. She's going to be here, but she's really nervous. And so I kept waiting for her to come the first day to take enroll. I was waiting for her, and I just happened to peek outside of my classroom door, and she was standing in the hall. And I just said, hey, are you? And she said, yes. Come on in. I said, you and I are going to do this together. And so a lot of times I think just getting students to believe in the possibility that they can not only come, but they can conquer and they can achieve and they can go on to greatness. I mean, really, from the beginnings of the community college, you can go any path you want to go. If you want to go directly in the workforce, you get to do that. If you want to go and get your PhD or go get your MD, you can do that. So I think just overcoming that initial fear is a huge step. And I think the other portion, at least that I see in my students, is that they are coming ill-prepared. I have students that I'm having to teach what a period is, what a comma is, how to capitalize and where to capitalize certain words, why. And so somewhere along the way, whatever education system they've been in has failed them. And now taking that student and saying, yes, it's failed you here, but I promise we will get you on the right path. And then taking those students and working with them individually. I'll work with the student individually, getting him through remedial courses, and then moving them on up. So a lot of times overcoming some barriers that the student might not even know existed could be a big one as well.
I'll just ask, how many of you guys go to Starbucks? Okay, not very many. I don't go to Starbucks, and the reason I don't go to Starbucks is I go in there and the menu is so huge, and I'm like, I have no idea what to even choose. Someone please tell me what to get. And I think that first-year students or first-generation students or returning adult students often feel like there's this huge menu, and like they don't even know where to go, and so they just pick what they know. And so I always get plain black coffee. No sugar, no cream. And if I had someone maybe to guide me through, one of you guys that drink Starbucks, go with me to Starbucks and say, hey, get this, try this, you'll like it. Then I may be a little bit more confident in stepping outside of my comfort zone. And I think that anytime you do anything new, it's a risk. And so students who are coming here for the first time, whether as adults coming back from the workplace, as first generation students, or as just as a student, you have to be open to new experiences. And I think that the way you get that is by building those relationships. And I think you said earlier, knowing you care about your students more than however you said it. And I think that establishing a sense of community in your classroom and allowing students to feel comfortable and ask for help and let them know that it's okay to not know the answers. I think that's what I would let students know is coming into college, because that's it's really important to be able to ask for help.
One last thing I'd like to hear your perspective on. I think I would be neglectful if I didn't mention this. There does seem to be some tension between how we perceive the purpose of an education, right? You have those who perceive an education as simply a process by which I get certain skills or credentials in order to get a good job. And you have others who see an education as yes, providing certain skills, but also sparking critical thinking, sparking the ability to think beyond what is known, as was mentioned earlier, thinking beyond that to achieve things that perhaps would not have been achieved otherwise. And so there seems to be some tension that I see, not only in academia, but in public policy circles, certainly between different groups of legislators. You see this type of discussion break down. And so I'd just like to kind of hear from your perspective, how do we reconcile that? Obviously, we have a tremendous number of students, and if you look at a lot of the education marketing today, it is geared not towards the traditional 18-year-old, but who is it geared toward? It's geared towards the working adult. The working adult to get a degree to advance their career. And so I think there is some kind of split. And so I'd like to, how do we reconcile those two things? Yes, obviously we all believe, our students are here, they believe that getting an education will be beneficial to them in whatever career they choose, but that there's more to education than just getting a skill to get a job. And so I'd just like to hear y'all's perspective on that before we wrap up.
I'll just say one thing that I have, difference between education and training. And so you think about the liberal arts education that we have, the humanities, the histories, the English. We're learning how to live and learning from the past and learning how our society is like it is now, versus your practical to make a living. And I think we need both. We need people who are going to continue to look to the past to help us figure out how we're going to move forward, but we also need the people who are going to be able to do those jobs moving forward. And so I see it as a balance between certain people who want to live in either world. And I think that you have people who live in each one.
That's well said. I agree with that. But I again go back to the different permutations each parent is going to have. As a parent, we homeschooled all our kids, and I think creative thinking is important. The career is important. Many of the things have been said are important. But for us, what is the purpose of education? Well, the Westminster Confession says, what is man's chief end? Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. What is the chief end of education? The chief end of education is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's what I teach my 4-year-old. That's what we've taught them all. And so, but that's me. That's not everyone's going to agree with that. So that's why I say it's so important for each parent to have a choice of where they want to go and what they want to specialize in or focus on or emphasize. So I hate to beat a dead horse, but I just can't say it enough. Having parental rights and parental purchasing power is very important.
I think on the flip side of the choice, that implies a certain responsibility of parents as well to be knowledgeable, to take their education of their children seriously, to invest themselves. I hear from public school educators all the time, what's the one thing that's missing is parental involvement, parental interaction with their child, with the school officials, with the teacher. And I think that choice inherently implies a responsibility as well. Would anybody else, any of our panelists like to have anything to wrap up with before we dismiss? No? Good. Well, thank you all for a very interesting discussion. I appreciate it very much. Thank you guys for coming, and we will see you in the spring with a whole new series of panel discussions.